Good morning, students. How are you all? I hope you all enjoyed my previous lesson. In today's video, I'll be reading chapter 1 of your textbook, that is New Images. The name of the first chapter is Mr. Toad's Adventure Lands Him in a Disaster. Let's begin with the reading of the chapter. One bright summer morning, Mr. Toad was walking briskly along the high road. He strode along till he reached a little town. He was exceedingly hungry after his long walk, so he marched into an inn, ordered the best luncheon, and sat down to eat it in the coffee room. He was about halfway through his meal when a familiar sound approaching down the street made him start and fall a trembling all over. The poop poop drew nearer and nearer. The car could be heard turning into the inn yard and coming to a stop. The party entered the coffee room, hungry, talkative, and in all praise of the car that had brought them along so well. Mr. Toad was all ears. He listened eagerly to their conversation for a time, but at last he could stand it no longer and slipped out of the room quietly. As soon as he got outside, he sauntered round quietly to the inn yard. "There cannot be any harm," he said to himself, "in my only just looking at it." The car stood in the middle of the yard, quite unattended. Mr. Toad walked slowly round it, inspecting it. "I wonder," he said to himself, "I wonder if this sort of car starts easily." Next moment, Mr. Toad was found seated in the driver's seat, holding the handle of the car. As the familiar sound of the car broke forth, the old passion seized on Mr. Toad and completely mastered him. He pulled the lever and swung the car round the yard and out through the archway. All sense of right and wrong seemed temporarily suspended for Mr. Toad. He sped so fast, not knowing where he was going. He was only conscious that he was Mr. Toad once more, Mr. Toad at his best and highest, Mr. Toad the terror, the traffic queller, the lord of the lone trail, before whom all must give way or be smitten into nothingness and everlasting night. He chanted as he flew, and the car responded with booming sound. He was living his hour, reckless of what might come to him. He increased his pace ever more when he heard the police siren. He thought he might escape, but he was caught at the next turn of the road. A chubby cop with a handlebar moustache approached him with a stern look on his face and demanded, "May I see your license, mister?" "License?" retorted Mr. Toad, huffing in the driver's seat. "I was just testing how fast this marvel could go. And excuse me, I don't need any license." Next moment, Mr. Toad was seen standing in the court of law. He was found guilty of stealing a car, driving dangerously, and cheeking the police. "Mr. Clerk, will you tell us what is the very stiffest penalty for such kind of offence?" asked the chairman. The clerk scratched his nose with his pen. Some people would consider, he observed, that stealing the motor car was the worst offense. And so it is. But driving dangerously and cheeking the police undoubtedly carry the severest penalty. And so they ought. Supposing you were to say 12 months for the theft, which is mild, and 4 years for the furious driving, which is lenient, and 15 years for the cheek, which was pretty bad sort of cheek. Those figures, if added together correctly, tot up to 20 years. An excellent suggestion, said the chairman approvingly. Prisoner, it's going to be 20 years for you this time. And mind, if you appear before us again, upon any charge whatever, we shall have to deal with you very seriously. Then the brutal minions of the law fell upon the hapless Mr. Toad. They loaded him with chains and dragged him from the courthouse. Mr. Toad shrieked and protested across the marketplace, where the spectators attacked him with carrots and popular catchwords. He passed under the frowning archway of the grim old castle. He passed guardrooms full of grinning soldiers off duty who coughed in a horrid and sarcastic way at him. He passed men-at-arms in a casque of steel, darting threatening looks at him. He passed the thumbscrew room. At last they reached the door of the grimmest dungeon that lay in the heart of the innermost keep. There at last they passed, where an ancient jailer sat fingering a bunch of mighty keys. "Oddsbodikins," said the sergeant of police, taking off his helmet and wiping his forehead. "Wake up and take over from us this wild toad, a criminal of deepest guilt and matchless artfulness and resource. Watch and ward him with all your skill." The jailer nodded grimly, laying his withered hand on the shoulder of the miserable Mr. Toad. The rustic key creaked in the lock, the great door clanged behind them, and Mr. Toad was a helpless prisoner in the remotest dungeon of the best guarded keep of the stoutest castle in all the length and breadth of merry England. So this way, children, Mr. Toad's adventure landed him into a disaster. Along with this video, I have shared the PDF of chapter 1. Read it again and again. Most of the words and their meanings have already been shared with you. You can also use a dictionary while reading to find out the meanings of some other words too. Read the chapter again and again, repeatedly. Thank you everyone. Keep learning and keep practicing. Have a nice day.